Government fails, the world's off its rails, leaders are whacked, democracy is under attack. It's time to get smart, folks, time to get real. Let's cut through the crap, tell us how you feel. Let's cue the talent, let's meet the host. Podcast by George.
Hello, hi, how are you? Welcome to another podcast by George. The day after, and I wasn't even going to do a podcast on this, wasn't going to do a rant. I thought, what can I add to the dialogue? A lot of finger pointing going on now, but the more I looked at it, the more I thought, maybe I should. As usual, I've got some thoughts, a perspective, an angle on this that a lot of folks don't have, so I thought I'd go ahead and give you my feelings, my thoughts, and first and foremost, as far as feelings and thoughts are concerned, made me feel old, folks. You get to that point in life where I'm at right now. Honest to God, it's starting to creep in. I thought, I wished I had not lived long enough to see this. Yeah, that's what I thought when I was looking at that, but I did. And it happened. And the other thing that it reminded me of, it's one of those things that happens you can't do anything about. And when it does, it's a really bad feeling. This is unique. It reminded me of when the deputy brought me divorce papers. I mean, I didn't acknowledge the lawyer's demands and all of that. The letters were coming. I didn't respond to them. I thought, well, I know they'll do that. I'll just wait. Kind of self-denial, kind of hiding out. I don't know what you want to call it, but eventually the papers get delivered, and it's that kind of a feeling. Now, my wife wants me to tell everybody that I'm completely happy now, and I'm happy that I got remarried and things are on the right track, and everything's been going great. My God, we've been married for 30 years now, so I gotta mention that, obviously. She also wants me to mention right off the top here that, 90% plus of the fault here lies with Donald Trump and his followers. Obviously, I don't think anybody's going to debate that, but there's about 10% that's got to be sorted out yet, and that's what I'm wanting to do here today. And yesterday, I'm watching kind of maybe with half an eye even, the ceremony, the pomp and circumstance going on in the House and the Senate, as all of the partisans are tuning in, mostly Democrats, because they know that Biden is going to be named president of the United States. The Republicans and the Fox viewers are hanging on to the protest by, the states that are going to, the senators are going to object to the election results. And I'm watching this, C-SPAN initially, but then also CNN and MSN were on, and all of a sudden, on my internet feed, up blinks Jordan Sheridan and Status Quo. They're live, and this throng, this mob, is moving towards the Capitol. And they're doing real journalism, folks. How do you do that? It doesn't take a decoder ring. It doesn't take a $10,000 television camera. It doesn't take a director. It doesn't take a producer. It doesn't take makeup. It just takes boots on the ground. It just takes a cell phone in the air. That's all they were doing. And I'm looking at this and going, oh my God. Switch over to MSNBC, CNN, NBC, ABC. No coverage at all. They're covering the geriatrics inside the chambers eating grape jello and and doing this ceremony. I mean, it went on for half an hour. It was obvious what was going to happen. And literally, the storm was raging outside the door, and mainstream media was completely unaware of it. And for that reason, if none other, folks, you got to watch independent media. You've got to read it. I've been telling folks this for months now, for a couple of years on my podcast. I'm a very small part of it, obviously, but I mean, go to those other channels. Go to like Status Quo and see what in the hell is going on. I wished Capitol Police would have, because they might have responded better and earlier and got some more people there, maybe, although it's debatable as to whether or not they were actually in on this, but nobody seemed to be aware of what was happening, but Status Quo was, and that's where I was watching. The other big takeaway that I have is somewhat unique. It struck me as I was looking at this that, my God, after all of the insults, all of the racism, discrimination, the rapes, the murder of minorities in this country, what group is the one to breach the Capitol and break into the sacred chambers of our democracy? A malignant blob of overfed, internet-crazed dimwits with guns that they were allowed to have by our illustrious government. They are the ones that come into the Capitol and result in death and destruction, the type of which this country has never seen before. And why did they do it? Have these nuts always been with us? Yeah. Have they been enabled by the media? Yeah, they have. The various partisan platforms, folks. I mean, they play a big role in this. Those are your Fox News viewers. Those are your Trump Twitter followers. That's who those folks are. The media has created this scenario, and it's happened because they're repeating CIA talking points every night on cable news, both sides of the political spectrum. They're repeating DNC and RNC talking points that are fed to them. And they have turned a blind eye to election corruption. Particularly the Democrats come to blame for this now, because I'm telling you, folks, it was obvious and apparent not only to the liberal left, folks like myself, the progressives, that the DNC robbed Bernie Sanders of the nomination in 2016, that primary was rigged. It was also obvious and apparent in 2020. You saw my podcast on the Shadow app and what the DNC did in the Iowa caucuses that resulted in stopping Bernie Sanders and his march to the White House. Folks, it wasn't just the left that saw this. Those other people did too. Those nuts sitting in the House chamber with their regalia and guns, they saw it as well. So when you allow that type of thing to happen, when you don't speak out about it, when you don't cover it the way that it should have been covered by these cable news outlets, by mainstream media, this is the end result. And the other part about it was, and I think this plays a role, and nobody talks about this very much, but myself, I have been shocked and appalled that Joe Biden was the one to come out of the Democratic Party. Obviously, they coalesced around him. Obama got involved. The DNC, the other candidates dropped out. They put this guy who was the least popular candidate in the field, I think, when we had the Iowa caucuses at the early part of the primary, put him as the nominee for the Democratic Party. Now, again, people like me weren't the only ones that saw that, folks. Those people on the right, those nuts that were in the chambers yesterday with guns, they saw that as well. Okay, Trump comes out and he tells everybody that the election is rigged, that he was actually the winner, that the election in Georgia was rigged. Well, you'd say, how could anybody believe that? Well, you get my point? You see what I'm getting at? I mean, I could see how they could come to that conclusion. And that was never properly covered, that was never made known the way that it should have been by the news media. They have a huge complicity in what happened yesterday in the nation's capital. The other part of this, just a small part that people will never connect, I think it's connected to almost everything. Julian Assange. I mean, my God, the country is aflame. It is ablaze. It is enraged, both sides of the political spectrum, by what they view as fake news. My wife hates it when I use that term because it came from Trump, she says. But anyway, the right thinks the left is promulgating fake news and vice versa. Well, what's the one media outlet? What's the one journalism concern? And people accuse him of not being a journalist, if you can believe that has never found to be wrong about anything. You can tune in the news tonight, and I guarantee you can cite a half a dozen things that are wrong on your evening news tonight or in your newspaper tomorrow morning. WikiLeaks has never found to be wrong about anything. So one major reason to support WikiLeaks and to support the freedom of Julian Assange is simply the fact that he's a truth teller, that he's been right down the line. So that, again, is an angle that is going to go unreported. Very few people, if anybody, would connect Julian Assange and WikiLeaks to what happened yesterday. All right, let's talk about another angle on this that I've talked about a lot on my podcast, and it has to do with Russiagate and Ukrainegate and censorship in particular, and drones also. We've talked about that. Whenever you support those nefarious endeavors like that, whatever they might be, I always tell folks they're coming for you. They will come back upon you. And that's what happened. All of this reporting that has been allowed to go along supporting Russiagate, Ukrainegate, the war crimes, the use of the drones, that is the premise, the foundation for these people becoming so misguided and so misdirected and so full of hate and outrage that they storm the Capitol. It all comes back to you. Yesterday was a bit of full circle, folks. It was a bit of karma. And that's why we have got to stop that partisan falsehood that is promulgating American media. All right, I talked about the finger pointing. It's time for this part of it for sure. And that is the fact that Donald Trump was allowed to do what he's been able to do, including getting those people into the Capitol yesterday by major groups of special interests in this country. They all have blood on their hands, literally. They're all to blame. Well, not literally, I guess figuratively. I shouldn't say that, but figuratively, they have blood on their hands, and that is America's business leaders, the wealthy in this country that turned a blind eye and were in on the deal because they got their tax cuts. They got the support from Donald Trump that they needed. They got the CARES Act in March, the $5 trillion that went to the top. So they sat there silently because they were getting theirs. The religious right had a champion for what? I don't know. Anti-abortion, I guess. The guy literally couldn't hold a Bible upright. So I don't know that Trump was a real champion of religion, but they viewed him that way. They didn't say anything. They turned the other way, turned the eye the other way when it came to Donald Trump, and this is the end result of that. Farmers, the same way. My God, I know that first and foremost in the part of the country that I live in. I mean, they just kind of, as long as things were going along and they were getting their subsidies and their tax breaks and their help for Trump, yeah, they complained a little bit about the export situation and the tariffs and all that stuff, but by and large, they weren't going to say anything. Well, folks, okay. The last major group, gun nuts. As long as they had a guy in there that was going to not do anything to their precious right to own more guns than they can carry, they didn't say anything about Donald Trump either. They are complicit in this, and when you have that coming together of business interests, of religion, morality, a populace that's full of racism, that really is the technical definition of fascism. And that's what you saw on full display yesterday when they stormed the Capitol. Okay, I'm going to wrap up here because a lot of people say, okay, that's all good, George. You're pointing fingers. You're making complaints. Well, what's the solution to this? Well, I don't know how to solve the problem with the nation's newspapers, the major metropolitan dailies, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, that control so much, particularly the northeastern part of the United States, which controls so much of America, particularly. You got the LA Times out in California, obviously. But the point that I want to make is one thing that we could do, one thing that you could demand, just like writing and contacting and phoning your elected representatives. Contact your television stations, your cable news networks in particular, and tell them that we need more perspective. We need something other than the group of talking heads on television that are getting you into the chamber during a civil war, basically, a half hour late, for God's sake. Well, that's one thing. Tell them to wake up, maybe get a new producer I can't believe that they were doing that. I mean, again, that's just shocking to me. But the bigger point that I want to make is they need to have a seat at the table on Meet the Press, on Rachel Maddow, at Chris Hayes, at Sean Hannity, Tucker Carlson, Wolf Blitzer's shows, and all those people. If you put one of these voices that have been complaining loud and long about all the things, most of the things that I've delineated on this rant, if you gave them a seat just one night a week on cable television, folks, the world would change. I guarantee you, just one night a week. Replace those people with the hosts, with the alternate independent voices that are so good and so correct and have been proven correct right on down the line on the big three that we talk about all the time on Podcast by George: climate, war, and healthcare. If you're watching this podcast, I know you support their perspectives on all three of those major issues. Support those folks getting a seat at the table on the set. And who am I talking about? I'm going to give you the names. Here's some of them. Jimmy Dore. God, give Jimmy Dore one night a week on cable television. The world would change, and I guarantee you it would change for the better. Lee Camp. Oh, my God, is that guy good? Perfectly capable. He's been relegated to RT, for God's sake. Give him a seat at the table. Eleanor Goldfield. Kyle Kalinske, Aaron Mate, he's been on Podcast by George. Matt Taibbi, he's been on Podcast by George. God, that guy is great, not only on politics and media, but he understands how the nation's banking system works and screws people in this country and around the world each and every day. Crystal Ball is great. Again, she's great on camera. She's got all this down. She understands. Give her a seat on the set. Katie Halper, same way, from Rolling Stone, the venerable, what once was the venerable newspaper of the left, which is not that anymore, but she does a great podcast for the Rolling Stone, Useful Idiots, and she also is great on the internet. Katie Halper would be great. Matthew Ho, our old buddy, our old pal from Podcast by George, just given his background. I mean, a soldier that quit the State Department over a dispute about the Afghan war. This guy would be great. He's got that right. That's more than most of these people that you're watching on cable television have, right? Put Matthew Ho on there. He's great on camera. You've seen him on my show. And speaking of great on camera with the bona fides, I got somebody for you that would be really good to bring on just one night a week. Somebody that's a military veteran, somebody that's currently in the military, somebody that's a medic in a pandemic, somebody that was a presidential candidate, somebody that's proved how they're not beholden to either party. As a matter of fact, quit the DNC when they saw how it was being rigged against Bernie Sanders. Yeah, folks, Tulsi Gabbard, bring her on. It could change the world. Just one night a week. An entire show would be great, but I just can't imagine the amount of good that would be done by that. Well, I'm way over time. These rants, I don't want to make them that long, but I just get on a rolling here and I can't seem to get it wrapped up, but I'm going to do it right now. I'm going to close out. Encourage your comments. We're getting a lot of new followers on YouTube that seem to like this perspective, and I appreciate that. Subscribe on YouTube, ring the notification bell, follow us on Twitter. You can like us on Facebook, and please watch and listen to Podcast by George everywhere podcasts are seen or heard. But that's going to do it. That's going to wrap it up. That's all there is, and there ain't no more. That's another Podcast by George.